Hi folks, welcome back to my channel, welcome back to me to do these videos. Let's take stock of where we are at right now. There's a reason why I'm doing this particular video of Saturn entering Capricorn. We have just come out of 3 eclipses on June the 5th in the sign of Sagittarius, the first of the Sagittarius-Gemini eclipses that will occur again later this year and in 2021. And on June the 21st, the Cancer new moon solar eclipse, and the last of the Cancer eclipse, and on July the 5th, the Capricorn full moon lunar eclipse. So the Cancer solar eclipse on June the 21st and the Capricorn lunar eclipse on July the 5th were the last of the Cancer Capricorn eclipses that have been in place since the middle of July 2018. Now, the signs of Cancer and Capricorn, even though we've gone through the last of the eclipses, the signs of Cancer and Capricorn remain active for the second half of this year, especially the sign of Capricorn. The sign of Cancer remains active because we've had a solar eclipse, and solar eclipses affect timelines roughly 6 months ahead of them, although this one I think is going to start to dissipate really even as early as August the 18th, but then certainly by the end of September, and especially by October the 25th and then November the 30th, it's going to keep dissipating. But we also have a second new moon in Cancer. Sometimes when a new moon occurs in the very first degree of a sign, we'll get a second new moon in the last degree of a sign, because new moons occur 28 degrees apart from each other, and each sign has 30 degrees. So the fact that we get a second new moon in Cancer re-emphasizes or gives the Cancer portion of our chart another boost, makes those topics active at least till August the 18th or so, when we have our new moon in Leo. So we've just come out of 3 eclipses. The sign of Cancer remains important because we have 2 new moons side by side, and we have a Mercury cycle that got inaugurated when Mercury, a retrograde Mercury, met up with the Sun in June. That takes us to October 25th. And the sign of Capricorn, even though we've had the last of the Capricorn eclipses on July the 5th, remains active because Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto, 3 heavy-hitting planets, are in the sign of Capricorn till the middle of December, when Jupiter and Saturn hand-in-hand move into the sign of Aquarius. This video is about Saturn and Capricorn one final time, and you'll understand why. I want to get through the Saturn and Capricorn video and perhaps the Mars and Aries video before I do the new moon in Cancer video, which I will do after the new moon occurs on Monday morning my time. So likely I'll do the video Monday afternoon my time or Monday evening my time. Those of you who follow my channel know I prefer to do new moon videos after the new moon. It's different from what others do. I just like to do it that way. The energy doesn't get started till after the new moon anyway. The planet Saturn, the sign of Capricorn, has been under a fair amount of pressure for a while, but especially since December 20th, 2017, when Saturn came into Capricorn. And then the Cancer Capricorn eclipses started in July 2018, and in January 2019 we had the first of the Capricorn eclipses. So we've had, and then in December of 2019, Jupiter entered the sign of Capricorn, building pressure of different kinds, so that there's been a kind of a potpourri, if you like to call, a mishmash of energies that are all quite powerful. Pluto's presence in the sign of Capricorn, wherever Capricorn sits in your chart, whatever house it occupies, what that house stands for, indicates a death and transformation. Sometimes it indicates a physical transition, whether it is related to the party or especially someone who's indicated by the house opposite, where Capricorn sits, maybe the sign of Cancer. Plus the eclipses are in these signs. So eclipses also, as I've mentioned since July 2018, as I mentioned to you before, eclipses, and just look at the last couple of months and the sheer number of people transitioning, and especially transitioning in an eclipsy way, in a sudden way. Overwhelming practically this year, with 3 eclipses back to back, as opposed to the usual 2. So, but in larger contexts, the sign of Pluto indicates a kind of a change and a death and a transformation, or change and a transformation, change, transformation, same thing, a transformation that we really are powerless against. We really can't influence the change, we just have to accept it and we have to live with it. It's a little bit like the analogy someone, in talking about Pluto's effect, another astrologer had likened it to, you know, that saying that, you know, God sort of burns down the barn so you can see the moon. That kind of, there's nothing you can do about it. Pluto's here. It does kind of have this kind of slightly terrifying, terrorizing aspect to it. Creates a certain kind of transformation that you can do nothing about, and you have to live with it and work with it. I'll come to Saturn's presence in Capricorn last. The eclipses of release, the South Node eclipses in Capricorn, indicate that wherever Capricorn sits in your chart, at least since the middle of July to the end of this year, something about that part of the chart has become a strength or an easy thing to lean back on, or a behavior that you aren't even conscious about. You're subconsciously strong in it. But the strength and the security that it gives you in that set of behaviors that has become even arguably compulsive is no longer serving you. You are meant to lean into the sign of Cancer and what that occupies in your chart, and leave behind something, release something, either something physical or an attachment to something. And typically it is an attachment to something. Sometimes it is an attachment to the way things are and the way we want them to be. But there's something about the eclipses of release that are always talking about a set of behaviors and patterns and boundaries and strengths that we have become very comfortable with, that really do need to be released because they are no longer serving us. There is no growth there. There's only stagnation. And South Node eclipses can be a little bit challenging because we just fall back into them so easily, but there's no growth there. The universe is just, there's no success there. So not only has there been an element of death and transformation, or transformation in the sign of Capricorn for a while, since Pluto has been in this sign, we've had the South Node eclipses there since the middle of July, if not the start of July 2018, if not, if you want to be more precise, the start of January 2019. And then, while Saturn has been there and these eclipses have been occurring, Jupiter, for me, the planet of endings and new beginnings, auspicious new beginnings, but really marked often by an ending, came into this sign in December 2019 and leaves in December 2020. And Jupiter's entry almost invariably marks, as I said, an auspicious new beginning. Sometimes it's growth, sometimes it's expansion, sometimes it's gain, but more often than not, it is clearing the space for a new beginning to occur. And with all these heavy-hitting planets, Jupiter's entry in 2020 in Capricorn is what has made this Capricorn energy so intense, because it is building on Pluto's presence here, Saturn's presence here, the South Node eclipse presence here, to finally create a transformation. I have likened this in previous videos to the idea that the sign of Capricorn has been hosting a forest fire, and this is the year when we put out that fire dies away, and we actually start to see shoots of green start to appear. But the fire still burns in certain cases, and in the second half of this year, I think we have an opportunity. As I've mentioned, a broad theme of the second half of this year is to put behind us and finish up lessons and tasks related to themes that have been in play for us since July 2018, so that we can move forward into a new set of energies, especially starting December of 2020. So in keeping with that, there's this idea of finally putting the fire out, doing what we need to put the fire out, and encourage the greening to occur in the sign of Capricorn. And that is one of the major things that the second half of this year is about. It involves releasing a set of behaviors and patterns once and for all, allowing for a new beginning to happen, continuing to lean into the transformation and make the most of it. And with Saturn's presence here, Saturn rules Capricorn. Saturn's presence anywhere in any part of the chart requires us to eliminate behaviors and patterns that are holding us back in a way that they don't allow us to meet our worldly or earthly potential. Saturn is ruthless about identifying lessons and continuing to put them in front of us over and over and over and over again in a way that they can't be ignored. And Saturn is very clear-sighted about what patterns, behaviors, and boundaries have been put in a certain part of a chart and really need to be dealt with, because they are somehow preventing us from maximizing our potential. So we've also had this very strict teacher in this part of the chart that is like, learn this lesson, learn this lesson, learn this lesson, learn this lesson, learn this lesson. This is not where it needs to be, and we are dragged through the process kicking and screaming. Saturn, briefly between March and June of this year, moved out of Capricorn and into Aquarius, and then went retrograde, and around June the 29th moved back into Capricorn. It'll go direct at the end of September, and then in December, along with Jupiter, it'll move back into Aquarius. Saturn in Capricorn is in many ways about preserving and strengthening the status quo and the conservative old school patterns of power and hierarchy that are in place, the rules that are currently in place, and how to play within those rules. When Saturn is in Aquarius, another sign that it rules, Saturn takes on a radically different approach, and radical is a good word to use. Sorry, it's Los Angeles and there's a helicopter above. Radical is a good word to use for the sign of Aquarius. And so Saturn in Aquarius requires us to, excuse me, let me wait for this. Oh my God, it's like military helicopters, 2 of them. Saturn's presence in Aquarius means that we start to think about issues related to social progress much more critically and much more rationally and with a much more discerning eye, and protest and rationally moving towards greater equality or expounding on humanitarian principles becomes the order of the day. It's a day and night shift between Saturn and Capricorn, which is about what do you need to do to get an A+? Well, if those are the rules, then play by the rules and climb the mountain and get an A+, to moving into Aquarius and going, what is A+, and what does this A+ mean? And why are we fighting about this A+, and why are we moving towards it? This makes no rational sense. You know, it's a different paradigm, both rational, both acutely grounded and earthy and non-spacey, non-faith-based in a certain sense almost. They are very real and very practical meditations. The military is flying, you know, talk about Saturn and Capricorn. The military helicopters have decided to fly by the skies of Los Angeles just as I'm doing this video, just to prove a point. Well, it seems to be the same 2 that are changing course. Okay, fine, whatever. So there are 3 things with Saturn and Capricorn that I want to bring up. 2 on a macro level and 1 on what it means in your chart. I'm so happy this branch is there and that it's growing and that it's alive. And I was happy to include it in the video, but really must it tickle me during my video. So first and foremost, as far as COVID is concerned, this dance and interplay between Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter have produced markers in terms of dates, at least in the way that we have experienced COVID in the States and to some extent globally. Saturn and Pluto met up once around January the 12th. And that, for me, you know, remember, it's not the exact date that counts, but the days, the weeks that lead up to the dates with these slow-moving planets. That, to me, is the ignition of not only COVID, but this kind of warlike, revolutionary, civil warish, this kind of strengthening of the base and strengthening of the opposition thing that we've been going through this year. The planet of responsibility and rigor and rationality and discipline and success and maximizing our potential met up with the planet of death and transformation, the planet of restriction, the planet of the straight and narrow, the planet of what is working and what is not working, met up with the planet of death and transformation on January the 12th. So in the couple of months before that, at least from a COVID perspective, and even from a social and political perspective, I feel like that was the ignition of the spark. Jupiter meeting up with Pluto 3 times. Jupiter, the planet of expansion and endings and new beginnings, meeting up with the planet of death and transformation twice. Once in April, if I recall correctly, once at the end of June, and finally November the 12th. Means to me that we're not really done with a COVID perspective, and indeed the time between now and about November the 12th are important and active, because if you look at the movement of the planets, we've got Pluto, we've got Jupiter retrograde, we've got Pluto retrograde, and we've got Saturn retrograde, okay? Jupiter goes direct on September the 12th, and when Jupiter goes retrograde, it is about 5 degrees away from Pluto, and then it conjuncts Pluto on November the 12th. 5-degree conjunction getting closer and closer to me indicates that this expansion that we have recently seen of COVID will start to be a little bit more manageable. Well, I don't know if it'll be manageable. From a Jupiter-Pluto perspective, the expansion will start to decrease till September the 12th, but after September the 12th and as you head towards November the 12th, it will start to increase again. Saturn getting closer to Pluto, getting closer and closer, and when Saturn goes direct on September the 28th, it's going to be less than 3 degrees away from Pluto, and that I fear more, because the Saturn-Pluto conjunction has a causality to it that Jupiter and Pluto expands. So we're heading towards a volatile time here anyway in the States, both with the election and also with COVID. And I think that the second half of this year requires us to manage the forest fire on multiple levels. What is most interesting and notable with Saturn coming back into Capricorn at the end of June and the beginning of July, in the way that I experienced it, was that the fervor and the activism of Saturn in Aquarius from March to the end of June ended abruptly, only to give way to greater support to the conservative, which have become much more seemingly calculated and desiring and organized and coming together to try and push for a victory in the election. Certainly, if you haven't felt it, I felt it strongly in terms of the way, very in Saturn and Capricorn, the ranks are organizing. There's a consistency in message and messaging. There's a plan with regard to how to get that message out. There's a plan with regard to how to capitalize on some of the activism to strengthen one's base. So I politically and socially stand on the more liberal side, but so know that as I go into these videos. At the same time, this channel is meant to be welcoming to everyone, and the astrology sits and applies to everyone. So at the same time, I think from a conservative side, what I'm seeing since January the 29th, July the 1st, is that certain responses to both the Black Lives Matter movement and the way COVID has been handled or perceived to be handled from the liberal side is causing a certain galvanization in a very Saturn and Capricorn way of the conservative side. As I've mentioned to you before, if the current president of the United States makes it past this Cancer period, his chart only stands to get stronger. And I've often wondered whether he does get reelected in October, November, so that by the time Saturn and Jupiter move into Aquarius in December, the nation is somehow enveloped in active activism, of a certain kind, to move towards social equality and social equality issues. Or is it that he loses the election? Really, we still have a few weeks to see where things are going and how things go. Or if he loses the election, whether that is just the bent of where it is that we're going to head towards and where it is that we're going to go. Volatility, war, revolution, intensification of the disease in a certain way are on the cards till about November the 12th. After November the 12th, after the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction, Jupiter and Saturn really start to prepare to move into the sign of Aquarius, which they do December the 17th, Saturn, December the 19th, Jupiter, and December the 21st, they meet up. There's a conjunction. They literally walk into the sign of Aquarius together. And when I say that the second half of this year is about finishing up things personally, let's move to the personal now, as opposed to the social or the political. When I say that the second half of this year is about finishing up things, putting out the fire that has been in this part of the chart since December 2017 at least, if not before, and allowing for the greening to occur and nurturing the greening and welcoming life, positive life, back into this part of the chart, the Capricorn part of the chart, the house that sits in, what that house means. Getting that swept away so that by the time December comes around, we can really embrace the new. This is very much part of what I am seeing and thinking. Do not despair insofar as you're looking forward, if you're someone who's looking forward to the Gemini Sagittarius eclipses and you enjoyed what that brought into your life between April and June, understand that these eclipses will be back in action starting September the 30th and will start to gather more and more momentum. The eclipses on November the 30th and December the 14th are very much on that axis. So, but certainly over the summer, where we are at right now, with another new moon in Cancer in 2 days' time, both the Cancer part of the chart, the Capricorn side of the chart, and the Mars in Aries part of the chart are currently the active themes. And with Saturn in Capricorn, this flip-flop that Saturn has done this year between strengthening the conservative and giving us a sample of strengthening the liberal or the activist, I think what I will say, the discerning activist, so to speak, the rational activism, has been really interesting, and Saturn's power can be felt. With Saturn in Capricorn, it's very much, Saturn in Capricorn insofar as Saturn in Capricorn, a lot of astrologers view Saturn in Capricorn in purely conservative terms. I still look at Saturn in any sign that it's in as really examining and bringing to light boundaries, behaviors, and patterns that are no longer serving us. So it remains to be seen. I remain curious about Saturn's influence in Capricorn. Is Saturn exposing weaknesses, boundaries, patterns in our current long in place social and political structures because they're no longer serving us? Or is it here to strengthen them because it likes those rules, and while it's in Capricorn, it is sort of single-mindedly focused on strengthening the current hierarchy in such a way that the rules are clear and we know how to play by them and how to succeed, how to get that A+ within the way exams and life are currently structured without really questioning too much what the pillars or what the baseline, what the assumptions behind those rules are. On a personal level, things are less complicated than this, insofar as it is as simple as things that you have been dealing with since July of 2018 are back to be dealt with one final time. And they're on the Capricorn axis. The sign of Cancer is important in what it stands for, the house it sits in, the Capricorn. And so pay attention to those. And if you can identify those themes, they've been with you for a while. I've mentioned the word final exam before when I was looking at one of the videos, and this one is very much around, I'm going to use that kind of fire extinguisher metaphor with regard to putting out the fire once and for all, you know, one final time, and allowing the greening to occur in this part of the chart. So that's where we're at. Do not be surprised if themes that you thought were dormant in the first half of this year to some extent, or certainly between March and the end of June, come back to be revisited, have already come back to be revisited, have already made their presence felt, because you need to start dealing with them. So don't be surprised if that is what you see and that is what you've already started to experience. Don't panic about it. With Saturn, slow and steady wins the race, and Saturn is here till December. So, you know, don't panic about it, and just see if you need to sort of climb those steps step by step. Just start the process of doing so and start to put the past behind you, but not in a way in which you are going back to the old, but much more in a way where you are paying attention to or clear about what you need to do to eliminate certain behaviors and patterns, to set up new boundaries, and to be clear about what needs to be finished up so that you can be clear to welcome the greening and move into new energies, certainly, for sure, in a much cleaner way by December 2020. Okay, my information is going to be in the subject area. If you want to reach out to me and inquire about rates for readings, you're welcome to do so. I also make easy-to-read versions of birth charts for people so that they can see which signs are in which houses and what those houses stand for. So you are welcome to inquire about rates for that too. You'll need to know your birth time for that. Do not share your birth time with me right now if you write to me. Inquire about rates. Get the rate information first, and then you can see whether you want to go further. Feel free to share this video, like it, comment on it. If it, you know, likes and comments give it more circulation on YouTube. I would certainly appreciate that. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. When you subscribe, the bell icon will appear next to it, so you can click on that bell icon and it will notify you whenever I do new videos. All right, that's all I want to say for now. Welcome to Capricorn season yet again, one final time, and I will be back in the next couple of days. Thanks, bye.